You really want to change your success level, take it up a few notches, you crawl in the head of Mr. Big. When you understand what Mr. Big wants, when you can anticipate his wants before he even knows it, you can be in position to harvest him, and that is exactly what we're talking about on today's Growing Big Television. We talk a ton about creating high odds, low impact setups. To be most effective, you have to match your improvements to the habitat. Western habitat, heck of a lot different than Midwestern habitat. He's not putting all that energy into building up his antlers until his body's taken care of. The overwhelming majority of the tips that I come up with are issues I'm running into while I'm out here working. Very few topics fascinate me more than, frankly, dominance within the buck hierarchy. And just to confuse the issue a little bit right off the bat, everybody knows about that dominant buck. Dominance occurs between doe family groups every bit as much as it does between bucks. So, everybody talks about the dominant buck. That's kind of a misnomer in that dominance is more fluid than most people give it credit for. It's kind of, here's how I envision it. I envision it as an Egyptian pyramid with the very top level of stones being the dominant buck on that property at that time. Okay, you go one layer below him though, and guess what? Those bucks there may only be one truly dominant buck, but there may be 3-4 that are just right below him. Well, they are submissive or subordinate to that dominant buck and may be dominant or subordinate to the bucks on their level, generally pretty darn even, and so it's going to waffle day to day, and then they're dominant over all of these bucks below them, and each level you go down, the number of bucks are that much higher. Here's the catch. It's not written in stone like those pyramids were. It's more fluid. So you take that one dominant buck. Let's say he goes ahead and gets in a fight during the rut. He gets injured. I'll tell you what, in many cases, the difference between that dominant buck and the bucks right below him, not much. So once he gets injured, boom, he's taken over just like that very often. There's fluidity, it changes. If you ever wonder how much social stress impacts all of this, for those of you who are able to observe your deer, watch what happens to those bucks that are right here when that buck on the very top gets killed that year. When that buck gets killed, one thing that's going to happen almost always within a week to 2 weeks max, often within a day or two, is there was a reason that dominant buck was bedded here. There was a reason he was staging here, and there was a reason he was feeding here. If you kill him, that next one in line almost always takes his place, unless something major changes, because that dominant buck, what comes with dominance? Dominance means you rule the roost. You have the pick over absolutely anything within the whitetail world that you want, because you are the man and no one's going to stop you. So you select the best bedding area you possibly can that gives you every advantage better than any other location around you can provide. You select the best staging area, the best water source, the best food source that fits your needs. Every deer is different, but they all pretty much want and need the same thing. So you remove that dominant buck and that next one in line almost always takes his place. And that next year, those bucks right here, if you have the opportunity to observe it, so a disproportionately high amount of time those bucks literally explode. It's all because of the dominant structure within whitetails. Study it, understand it, and it's going to unlock a whole bunch of doors for you. Growing Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies, there is no substitute. Redneck Blinds, the best hunting blinds on the planet. Furminator, the best food plot implement on Earth. Hunter Safety System, saving lives is what we do. And by Antler King, bigger bucks, healthier deer.
Antler King, makers of the world's best food plot products, providing the highest protein and the most tonnage. But most importantly, deer love Antler King food plots. Antler King, bigger bucks, healthier deer.
This segment of Grown Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. So far we've tried to delve deep into understanding exactly what Mr. Big is thinking, and that is good and great. But now we need to add a whole new layer to this, and that's understanding dominance, and that's what we're going to be covering now. If you really want to take your game to another level, one of the biggest keys to doing so is actually being able to crawl in the brains of deer. Now, which is frankly difficult. They do not have the power of analytical thought such as we. Now, they can't communicate with words. They are obviously a different species. But the better we understand them, the better we can go ahead and use our best weapon, our brain, to put us in position for success. Okay, it all starts, well, let's start right here. Why am I standing on the bank of a lake in northern Wisconsin? Geez, no more than a couple days before season starts as we talk. The reason is this lake here, your typical northern Wisconsin lake, there is not a single lot around this lake, I doubt, is over an acre. Just small lot, small lot, small lot, small, long skinny lot after long skinny lot after long skinny lot with people coming up weekend after weekend all year long. And what I'm doing here is, you know what? I'm trying to get a last hurrah in with my wife before season starts. Now, I'm trying to show her that I love her and appreciate her. And as we've been here, you know what? I'm seeing deer walking through these parcels over and over and over. Why? Because deer are really, in one important way, no different than our dog at home. We can train them to accept anything. We can train them to fear anything. 100% based off of positive and negative reinforcements. Hey, these people that are up here in these lake homes, they're not hunting on their 1 acre parcel. They're here for fishing. Now, you go across the road, which the wife and I have, walking on the public land over there. That's a different animal. Every deer I have seen has been running the other way. Why? Because over there, what are people doing in the woods often on the other side of the road? They're hunting there. Over here, they're not. Remember, deer are no different than our dogs at home, and in that they can be trained to accept and fear anything. The other thing we have to understand is whitetail biology. Okay, during the course of season, whitetail, especially in the bucks, their biology is changing dramatically. Does as well, but let's stick to the bucks. They are going from being very peaceful bachelor groups right before season, generally speaking, to testosterone rising and going through all different phases. Now, we can't cover everything here, but what we can cover is learn and understand the different phases that a whitetail buck goes through in the fall. That way you can anticipate his needs and be set up. Understand that habitat over the course of season is changing dramatically. It is a dynamically changing being. It goes from having leafy growth and green grass and weeds everywhere to being a stark comparative desert after all that stuff dies. Okay, then factor in human pressure that goes back into the training. Now, in areas that are heavily hunted, you go ahead and do what we're supposed to do, and you know what? You learn that, this doesn't work very well, because if those deer are responding to what we're supposed to do, they're already dead because we're already out there doing all this stuff. Lastly, understand that dominance plays a huge role in a buck's life. Now, whether they're subordinate, whether they're somewhere in between, or whether they are the dominant buck. You factor all that stuff together, and now all of a sudden we can start crawling inside the brain of a whitetail. We understand tendencies, we understand dominance. That's all good and great, but now we need to understand pressure. Because if you don't think pressure has a huge impact on how you need to hunt bucks, well, you really need to watch this next segment. One of the best tips I can possibly give you is before you go out scouting, before you even think about hanging a tree stand, gauge the amount of pressure that ground is receiving. I'm exceptionally, unbelievably lucky in no small part because of you all. Now, you guys threw this northern Wisconsin kid on your shoulders and you carried me to success in these areas, and that's never lost on me, and holy man do I ever appreciate that. To this day, because of that, I am, as I speak, I'm managing a 2,500 acre piece of property, and I'm helping to manage a 5,000 acre piece as well, and then a handful of smaller properties, more real world properties. Okay. I get to hunt those utopias. That's part of my payment. Okay. It is incredibly, incredibly fun. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, especially on those bigger ones, whew, geez, if I just spent all my time hunting there, I would really, really, really look smart. Because everything works better on Utopia. When you are take a 2,500 acre property and you've got 12 people hunting it all year. Is that pressure? Because that ain't pressure in my book. That ain't real world. That's Utopia type stuff there. And on those types of grounds, you can get away with calling. Heck, I can take 2 arrows and go like this with them and rattling young bucks at least. Your decoying works so much more effective. Every single call, every single gadget, every single tactic I can dream up is going to work so much better there than it is in the real world. So much of what we're told are from people that never hunt the real world. In many cases, I believe they honestly believe what they're saying. But I'm telling you, what works on Utopia does not work on that pummeled public ground. Gauge how much pressure that ground gets. If it's high pressure, here I'm about to tell you in just a couple sentences my entire formula for successfully taking mature bucks off of heavily pressured ground. Find where everybody isn't, because 9 times out of 10 that's where Mr. Big is going to be. If he followed the rules that he's supposed to follow, you know what? He got killed at 1.5 years or 2.5 years old. He sure didn't make it till 3.5. The ones that survive these pressure cookers are the ones that don't do what we want them to do. Otherwise, they're already dead. They died as a fawn 1.5 years old or 2.5 old if they got lucky to make it that old. Find those spots where no one else goes. That is where Mr. Big is living 9 times out of 10 because that's how he's surviving. Next, do nothing to draw any attention to you whatsoever. I go ahead, I set up that stand 9 times out of 10 in the spring. I'll cut shooting lanes if legal at that point. If I'm setting up during season, not a chance. I am not trimming anything. All I'm doing is putting that stand up in that tree and trying to find windows that I can shoot through. What I do is I wait until up in Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those types of states, I wait until it gets to at least that last week of October, preferably first week of November before I ever go in there to hunt. I want that testosterone level up higher, inspiring those bucks to move more because I got to beat them in there. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to wait for a good deer movement weather day, meaning that it's not hotter than normal, not windier than normal. Okay, what I preferably like is have the temps going like this for about a week and boom, drop 10 degrees. When that drop occurs, I'm going to be up in that stand. I'm going to get up there a good hour before first light at a minimum, and I'm planning on sitting there until I kill or all day. On public ground, My buck hunting is very surgical. Go in when the time is right and make it happen that first or second time, because by the time you get to 3 or 4, odds are way too high that you've already tipped your hand. So I'll go ahead. I don't just hunt public ground and that limited of a basis, but before then and on bad weather movement days, I'm hunting over there. Areas that aren't as good, but that I could get lucky and I'm out here having some fun. Growing Big TV is brought to you by Chestnut Hill Outdoors, Reconics, see what you've been missing, and by Wildlife Research Center, the gold standard. We're here again with my good friend Todd Stillberg, and it may not come as much of a surprise, but Todd tends to know food plots. Okay, I'm struggling with exactly how to put this, but I think the best way I can phrase it is what you plant is important. It's very important, but equally important is having it in areas that deer feel safe, that they're willing to utilize this stuff. Because frankly, it doesn't matter if you can somehow plant an 80% protein producer, if the deer ain't eating it, they ain't getting any good out of it. What can we do to maximize, what are some things we can do to maximize usage of our food plots?
Well, not only maximize usage, but also help in hunting those deer, because
Exactly.
as you know well as I do, if a deer knows he's being hunted, it becomes a huge challenge.
Yes,
we can
it
turn
does.
them nocturnal and go on and on and on. It gets to be just a huge challenge. So we actually came out with a product this year called Barricade, and it's a screen basically. It's an annual, a number of annual species that grows very fast, can get to be 8 feet tall. And so you could use it to screen off your food plots. You could use it to screen your entry or exit to and from a tree stand. And I've got firsthand experience this year with success and failure with that.
Elaborate.
So I had a farm that we were hunting, and I had a gentleman that raises beef cattle, had a disastrous forage crop, and wanted to know if I'd be willing to sell him some of my forage so that he could cut it and bale it for his cattle. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Well, his son came in and cut it, and he happened to cut my Barricade also at the same time. So on that farm, which we had the most number of mature bucks we've ever had on that farm. So the excitement level for me and my family was through the roof. Well, what happened is basically every time we entered and hunted stands on that farm, we were seen by the deer. And it was the absolute worst season we've ever had.
Doesn't take long, does it?
Oh man, there was no hiding. And so we entered and hunt, we exited and hunt, and we were, seen all the time. Conversely, on another farm, I planted the Barricade, and 5 days into our gun deer season was sitting overlooking a plot, and there wasn't a deer on that farm that knew season was even going on. But we were able to totally screen ourselves from entering and exiting the stands.
Quick question, how big was that farm?
That farm was about 350 acres.
Okay, so we're not talking we're not talking a utopia here that is sprawling 3,500 acre. We're talking about, I mean, a little on the large side, but we're talking about a real world property.
It's
here.
real world, yep.
Yeah. And that really helps to illustrate how much our impact actually impacts not only how much nutrition these whitetails are getting, but how much nutrition we're getting in the freezer. Because frankly, when they know they're being hunted, they ain't spending a lot of time out there eating, especially not during daylight.
No. The other way we used it very successfully on that other farm is, if you plant an 8-foot wide screen that's 8 feet tall and thick, deer are not going to go through that.
Makes a great barricade.
But if I want them to come out in one corner of the field, I just knock that area down.
Yeah.
And you know what? you've mowed trails in the woods, and deer have a tendency to take the path of
You
least
darn,
resistance.
you darn right. Why do
So-
I want to go through this jungle when I want to that I can see this far in front of my face to see what's on that other side when I can walk over to this opening right here. Now, granted, there happens to be a tree stand 15 yards away, but from right there, I can go through there. I'm not going to be surprised at what's at the other side. I can see it from a distance. Todd, thank you. I don't think we can exaggerate the critical nature of this. And that is, yes, high quality food plotting materials make all the difference in the world, but so does being in the right place. When you marry those two together, now you got something.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, my friend.